Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Allegiant Health, Bass and Associates, and Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to the UNO Student Center. We were over at the Sapp Fieldhouse for a week, then took a couple of weeks off so you could contribute to Nebraska Public Television. Consider this, an organization which will be recognized tomorrow with the College of Public Affairs and Community Service Second Annual Gandhi Award does not get the recognition in the community it deserves. Or you might say that this is an organization that doesn't really represent a certain constituency and maybe shouldn't be recognized as one of the long-term charities or advocacy groups in Omaha. You decide. My guests today are Sherry Cody, Paul Turner, and Kathy McGraw. Now I'll tell you who they're with. They are with Omaha Together One Community, better known as OTOC in Omaha. And they've been in existence, what, about?
Since 1992.
7 years, and you've made a few waves here and there and gotten some results, but am I being fair to say that while you are mainstream in a sense, you haven't perhaps gotten mainstream recognition?
I don't know. I guess to some extent we probably have gotten some mainstream recognition because I think most people in Omaha are pretty aware of who Omaha Together One Community is. We are a broad-based organization. We're across the whole community. We're working in congregations across the community and bridging some of those gaps that we have in this community. So,
yeah, fight me on it.
Yeah,
I think people have a sense that OTOC advocates for perhaps those without a voice in Omaha. I guess you could characterize it, I hate to say, the poor parts of town, the poor people in town, ethnic minorities, and or among the kinds of things. Paul, how would you characterize it?
Well, I mean, I guess I would take issue a little bit with that characterization, only to suggest
I'm not finding the right words,
well,
so I'm asking for your
I mean,
help.
it's truly broad-based in the sense that it crosses all the lines that tend to divide us geographic, racially, denominationally, ethnically, that there are churches in far west Omaha that are anything but low and moderate income that are part of the mix. And that, you know, we really work hard to try to find issues that represent the interests of all of those folks so that we can discover that really there are a lot more things that unite us in Omaha than what divide us. And that if we focus on what divides us, we don't get very far as a community.
Well, and I think advocates is maybe not the right word because what you have are people in all of these congregations doing the work on the issues that are of concern and working together. It's not like one group is advocating for another group. Everybody's doing the work and everybody's participating, and you know that's the goal, is leadership development, so people are ready to do that.
Fair enough, because I know over the years when I've covered OTOC events or issues they were concerned about, I don't think I've ever met a group that's done more homework on a subject. You literally have, you study topics, and we'll get into some of these topics, but you study them, you come together, even some give and take, and at some points even arguing over what then we can agree on, and if this is an issue that we want to put forth to the community at that point. And it's not always a pro or con something as we need to explore this, we need to act on it, we need to move in a direction as opposed to just no direction. Is that a fair?
Yeah, well, I think one of the hallmarks of the organization is exactly what you said. It's the research. It's really knowing what the issues are, knowing kind of how to sort out the fact from the fiction, and teaching people how to do that for themselves. I think the point about advocacy is important. We try to teach people what we call the iron rule, which is that you never ever do for others what they can do for themselves. And that's really at the heart of what OTOC is about, is teaching people how to speak and do for themselves, including the research, so that they really know and understand what's going on in their community and can begin to explore what it takes to develop a collective that can act on those things and get results that are good for the whole city.
Some of the issues that you've tackled in the past are?
I can give a wonderful example of some of the things that you were talking about, and Sherry talking about how the city comes together. A few years ago, there was the bond issue on streets and sewers. There was a $57 million bond issue before the city. And we certainly knew that, for the most part, Omaha citizens vote a bond issue through.
Oh, I can't remember turning one down.
That's right. And our goal in that was we were concerned about where the money was going to be spent. It was primarily going to be spent in West Omaha and in new developments and things like that. And where was the equity in that when we think about North and South Omaha, where the streets and sewers in many neighborhoods are still one system, where the raw
They don't have
sewage,
sewer separation.
they're
as
not,
they call it.
they are not separated. The raw sewage and the storm sewers are still connected. And so when there's a storm, oftentimes families will have raw sewage coming up into their basements. And so our goal in that was to inform people about what was going on in some of our neighborhoods around streets and sewers, where this money was being planned to be spent, and was there a will to get some of those dollars redirected to where they needed to be. Now, some people in the city felt we were fighting against the bond issue, which is what we wanted to do, was inform people about how the money would be spent, and do you think that that's the right thing to do?
And the outcome of your effort?
The outcome of that is that money was redirected, and that's streets and the sewers are being separated in North Omaha now. So.
And I think that is a good example of what you do, because there are parts of the city just for, well, use the old squeaky wheel. And I've argued this with friends of mine who live in various parts of the city, most notably east of 42nd Street. And I'll say, you know, I don't think it's that so much that you don't know that there's a problem, is that the skills have not, and that you don't have capable people, but the skills have not been developed for whatever reason. Maybe just historically, you know, they work in their community, but they don't know how to interact with City Hall or the power structure. And this really has always impressed me as a way to really get people involved in democracy.
Yes.
On the lowest, you know, the lowest level, their street, their their voting district, their city.
Well, and they decide those issues for themselves. I mean, that's the point, is engaging people in face-to-face conversations and just asking them, what would you change? If you could change anything about your community, what would it be and why? And they may not have the skills initially to look at a budget and understand a bond issue, but they certainly know what they like and don't like about their community. And generally what you'll find is if you engage people in those kinds of conversations, you'll find certain themes emerge, and those themes cut across, you know, all the geographic distance in the city. Oftentimes concerns about our kids and their education. And so it's not as hard as we might think to find those kinds of issues that we can organize together around, even though it might seem on the surface that there's nothing that kind of draws us together.
Plus the sewer bond issue, street and sewer bond issue, is a perfect example of how numbers scare people to even learn about things.
Yeah.
But it's easy to divide something up into a pie and say, this is where this is, they're planning on
That's
putting
right.
this now, and saying, and then they get I'm guessing they get confidence in success.
Right. And it's easy, it's an easy issue for people across the city to understand, in the sense that if you know, many people who lived in West Omaha said, hey, you know, things are not bad where I live. I'm willing to not have any improvements out here and have the priorities be in North Omaha. I mean, that's an easy trade-off once you understand some of the issues and you are working with people who, you know, are directly affected by those kinds of problems. And so if they're aware that there's a trade-off in there, then many times, you know, they're not going to say, do my street first.
Right.
When they know there's
Or
a bigger
just
problem somewhere else in the
fairness.
city.
There's an equity issue, and I
Right.
think that that's a hallmark of OTOC, is an equity issue. Not so much as I've got mine, how are you doing, or they should have theirs, to the you know, the lack of something for somebody else, is that equity issue.
Well, and I think what OTOC does so well is oftentimes it's difficult to understand how someone else may live when you live clear across the city from someone. And if
Oh,
you don't
yes.
come into contact with that, it's not that you don't care about it, it's just simply that you may not understand what the problems are. So what we do is bring people together so that we can build relationships with one another, so we can begin to feel that we understand some of the dynamics that other people live in, and then thus it creates a whole force of people that then can become centered around that issue and support one another.
Let's go back to not the beginning of OTOC, but near the beginning when I remember, and I don't even remember what the issue was, or was it just an election forum when I think it was at Peony Park. Remember Peony Park?
Yes.
And you were attempting to get P.J. Morgan, then the mayor, to sign off on something, or
Well, it was a demonstration of good faith on his part, is what we were asking
with
for.
regard to an agenda.
Supporting our agenda, which was public priorities, placing children and families first.
Well,
and
it
was
sort of blew up.
And it was a big banner. It was just a banner. It wasn't,
It wasn't.
Contract.
it wasn't a contract he was signing or anything like
Right.
that.
You
And,
didn't need the city attorney necessarily.
Right. It was a show of good faith.
Well, this whole thing kind of blew up because
Yeah.
I remember the TV cameras were there, and
Yeah.
and he really he balked and got a little defensive, and I wonder if, and I remember the climate then, and I don't know if because I don't have the World Herald Morgue at my disposal. They were a little standoffish, as I believe editorially, because of the roots of your sort of, not parent organization, but where you sort of take the model from, that it was, this union activist kind of, not activism isn't even the term, I think, this aggressive, we'll have it our way and you'll give us our due, or, sort of, and it had its roots in Chicago, and we all know what we think of the Chicago style of politics, that there was just this sort of, some of the powers seemed to be at odds with you, but didn't give you a chance. I mean, that was my perception at the time.
Well, I think part of what people understand much better today that they didn't always understand then is that I think the impression given was that we kind of surprise people or blindside people when we talk to them about issues.
Yeah.
But the truth is, once we have done the research and people understand it, and we invite people to be part of a public a public event, that we always meet with that person, whoever it is.
Right.
And we brief them, we give them copies of the agenda, we tell them exactly what's going to happen, exactly what we're going to ask them, exactly, like we may ask you to sign this, how do you feel about that?
So it's not the
So
organization
it's-
corollary of a Mike Wallace
No.
Right.
interview.
No investigative cameras. So I think people didn't understand that at the beginning, and I don't think it was made clear in news articles, but that is the way OTOC operated then, that is the way we operate now. And people are, who maybe read that in the beginning and thought that's what happened, are pleasantly surprised to find out that isn't how it really is. And I think we have, that's much less of an issue today than it was then, because we do those things. We do try to be fair and make sure they understand. But then that's also the importance of officials being available in advance to talk with us and understand what's going to happen.
Well, and I think a lot of the dynamics that were going on at that time were that there was no other group in the city that was doing business like this.
Had ever taken that kind of approach in recent
That's
history. and
exactly
they-
right. So I think there was just some misunderstanding involved there, and maybe a little bit of wariness until people understood who we were and what we represented. And so I think people are beginning to, and certainly do now, understand that and are more at ease with the way that we do business.
Well, before we come up to the present time and some of the issues that I recall that the issue of activities for children, it was, and still is, we'll talk about that, an issue, and summer recreation. And there was some dispute is too strong a word. Some of the kinds of things that you were proposing were incorporated in the Sundogs project,
Yes.
and I don't feel that maybe you were quite, not that you lived to be recognized, but were not recognized so that people knew that you helped bring that about. That's the kind of thing that you were able to succeed in. Am I being fair and fair?
Well, we fought for programs for children during the summer months, and we continue to do that for before and after school programs as well, because we know that this is the time when kids get into trouble, when they're idle and parents are at work. And so initially the Sundogs program was begun as a result of some of the work that we did in working with the mayor and the Parks and Recreation director at that time. And as far as getting credit for it, we're pleased it happened. And I think a lot of people know that it was because of us that the Sundogs program got started, and it's now grown to 40-some parks, I believe, that there's actually a Sundog Shack at.
Well, let's talk about the kids, and let's talk about, there are 4 areas that you're working primarily in right now, but one of them is before and after school programs, and I think Project Ishmael is one of the ones that intrigues me the most, and I think tremendous, if you know, from a parental point of view, from a civic point of view. Would you explain that? Anybody? Go for it.
Project Ishmael was a
Nice
summer
biblical
program.
reference there.
Yes. It was a summer program that was developed in relationship with OPS, in that it ran from early morning till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I believe. And we had, initially, the city was telling us that there was not a need for such programs, and that's why they were not having them across the city. So our main objective for this was to prove a need, that we had a need. We had about 65 slots that were available, and we had over 400 applicants of families that wanted to get their children into this. So we definitely proved that there is a need for such programs. And it brought a very diverse group of children together from the Druid Hill area. And it was, OPS provided some in-kind services, and then it was the Lozier Foundation that actually gave us the grant in order to run the program. And then we provided a lot of volunteers that came in all throughout the day to help the teachers run the different programs. They had a lot of outdoor activities, they provided a lunch, they provided a lot of field trips. I'll never forget the time one of the boys, they were going to go to Boys Town. And this proves how when we think of what our perception of Omaha is oftentimes so different from what someone else's experience is. And this little boy said, Boys Town. He said, oh gosh, he says, that's so far away. He says, isn't that in Lincoln? I mean, it was just his perspective of not being able to have the opportunity to get outside of his neighborhood very much and to be able to experience those things. And that was just wonderful.
Concern over graduation rates in certain parts of the city. I mean, we should be concerned about it all over the city, because, you know, we can't brag about our graduation rate unless you want to say it's better than the city that's right under you. But particularly in parts of town that traditionally have, for a number of reasons, a high dropout rate. I think, I'm glad to see someone tackling it. What is that about?
Well, I think the idea there, first of all, is we can't solve a problem unless we acknowledge it first, and we had to just kind of say that there are just far too many kids that are not going on to graduate. If you look at the number of kids that enter their freshman year in an OPS high school and then the number that actually make it to graduation, there's a huge drop-off. It's something like 1,500 out of 3,500 kids. That's off the top of my head. That may not be exactly right, but it's a lot of kids that don't go on to graduate.
About 42%.
Yeah, I mean, it's a staggering number, and a number that I don't think most Omahans recognize, and we feel like people have to know that.
Well, you
if we're
brought
gonna,
that out.
Right,
I
and that was kind of the point of that. The other part of it, though, is there's got to be, central to this has got to be the role of the parents. And just in the same way that we try to organize congregation members to act on their best interests, we try to get parents involved in schools. Increasing parental involvement in schools right now is a real priority for the organization. Is trying to figure out a way to go into schools, build a relationship with parents, create some connections between the churches that are part of OTOC and schools that they're nearby, and really beginning to kind of build parents' teams that can then put together enrichment programs before school, after school, during the summer, that keep kids in school, that educate kids in creative ways that maybe aren't possible during the school day because of class sizes and everything else that are on teachers, and eventually get at that dropout problem so that we've got more kids staying in school and kids achieving better academically.
Part of your empowerment
Right.
kind of philosophy.
Yeah, we should sign you up, you know.
The ongoing issue of police-community relations, and you know, there were some pretty tense moments in the, I mean, not that riots were going to break out, I don't mean to imply that, but there were some, certainly I'd say the inflammation of some old wounds, if not the ongoing feeling among some people that they're not being heard, they're not being looked at as people as opposed to black people or Hispanic people. What are you doing in that area? I know that's a big concern.
Well, you've had Sam Walker on this show before here at UNO. He's a nationally recognized expert on citizen review boards.
Right.
I think he's got a very intriguing answer to this problem of creating some accountability between the police department and the community. And I think fundamentally that's the problem. There isn't a lot of trust and relationship between North Omaha and South Omaha citizens and the police department. And in order for that to change, there's got to be some confidence that there's some accountability mechanisms for citizens to be able to air their concerns and complaints, and that they're going to be heard and dealt with in an effective way. And Mr. Walker, I think, has got a pretty clear vision of what's worked in other cities where police officers that write certain kinds of tickets are flagged and you know, kind of go into classes and have to be watched a little more carefully.
Where do you come into it?
Well, I think that what we've got to acknowledge that requires money. It requires resources from the city, it requires a budget, it requires staff. It really has to be something that the city puts money into to try to create a kind of a citizen review process that has some accountability and teeth to it. And you know, I think there are attempts right now with the current citizen review to do that, but I think Professor Walker and others would argue that could be bolstered a little bit.
Well, they don't have much of a staff.
Right, exactly.
And so you will be, that's an ongoing thing that
we're doing the research right now on that. Yeah, that's right. And we're, you know, trying to create the constituency, talking to people in North and South Omaha. We've done a number of research forums out in those communities. And, you know, it's clear that that's a hot button issue for a lot of folks. So the question is, can we make that issuable? Is there an element of that we can really organize around as an organization and create this, really rebuild the trust between the police community
and I've found that, or have observed, I don't know this firsthand, and the observations can always be skewed by who's looking, that when one or two groups to the exclusion of others have a hot button issue, they feel alienated from the other people, and the other people feel alienated from them. In other words, this really bothers us. We really feel this is unfair. Kind of like the streets and sewers, they might have felt that way, and the other people just really weren't aware that, you know, this is a hot button issue, or to what degree, or felt, well, all I hear is whining, but I don't have any evidence. I don't have any, you know, either strong anecdotal evidence or whatever. And your research tries to put that out there for all to see. So you're talking about, it's hard to complain about, you know, we had forums where people just got up and screamed about things, and that puts other people who aren't familiar with that kind of off. You know what I mean? It creates a separation almost.
Well, I think the screaming sometimes is a result of people's frustrations of feeling helpless.
I agree.
And with OTAC, when you come together in a group and you feel that you actually have some power because of the number of people behind you, then you can approach it in a much different way. And
because if it ended with that frustration and screaming, then that's almost, in a sense, although they say it's good to vent, it's still preaching to the choir in most cases for some of those people. What about the convention center? I know this is something you're very concerned about, not because you think we should or shouldn't have one convention center or convention center and arena, but how it's funded, the burden on the taxpayers, the jobs it would provide, what kinds of jobs.
Well, we are looking at that issue, and we have been looking at it since, you know, a year and a half ago or whenever the talk about an arena convention center first came up. And I think that the research that we did on a convention center showed that a convention center, as opposed to an arena, is good for a community in that it brings in new money to the community in a way that an arena may not. And so at this point, you know, I think that would be our outlook on the convention center. But as you know, this is kind of a complicated financing plan that the city is kind of looking at, and it's before the part of it is before the unicameral to do throwback financing is what they call it. And so there's a bill there. But, you know, the latest is that there's a thought of downsizing to just a convention center and not having an arena. And then that knocks $80 million off the cost. But in essence, what the voters we're going to have to be looking at is $200 million anyway. So it doesn't knock any money off the bond issue as such, because the $200 million is still there. And I think for us, we think it's important that voters understand the issue and understand the financing, and that they get to vote on the entire $200 million or whatever the 205 or whatever the exact amount is when that time comes, so that they understand it. Then, you know, there are more complicated issues. If the building is downsized, then there are some other things. We may not need such a big site. We may not need all of that parking. We don't need thousands and thousands of parking stalls. We may not need as much street, you know, restructuring.
And the whole issue
And
of
so
the cleanup of the site.
It could be a lot less than $200 million.
Are you
if
still
we
in the
looked at it, you know, in a different way?
You've gotten some coverage on your concerns and the figures that you're quoting. Are you done studying this, or is this sort of an ongoing?
No, we're still looking at it because, you know, the bill is changing. The bill is kind of evolving and changing, and now two-thirds of the money would be available for throwback, not 100% of it. So then that lowers what will be coming to Omaha, and we need to understand all of that and know what the taxpayers are at risk for. Because the state basically says as long as Omaha taxpayers understand they're at risk for everything, maybe, you know, that's fine with them.
We have about a minute left, and I just want to ask, with one of the largest bond issues in the history of the universe, it seems, but I think it's basically in the state, the Omaha School bond issue to revamp the desegregation plan. Is that something you're going to be looking at?
Well,
Because there's not a lot of time.
That's right.
We've got about a minute here.
that's right. We have two concerns about the DSEG plan and the bond issue that's coming through. Number one, that it's happening so quickly, that it seems to be that there's just this push to get this through so quickly. And secondly, we have some real concerns about the equity assurance of will we have equitable schools across the city.
Yeah.
And so currently, in fact, we're meeting tonight. Our Youth and Education Committee is meeting tonight to continue discussions around what our concerns are and what we will be doing about it. And we have future forums set up with Dr. McKeel, where we will be providing forums, and everyone is welcome, and we'll get that information out.
And the point is, you can call them. They're in the phone book. Omaha Together, One Community. Now you've got a feel, if you didn't before, and you might want to give them a call. I want to thank you, Sherry, Paul, and Kathy, for being with us today, and keep us
Thank you.
posted.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us.
Music again.
Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Allegiant Health and Bass & Associates.